What I'm about to tell you sounds like something straight out of a Hollywood movie, but I promise you, every word of this story is true. If you think one man with a single rocket launcher can't possibly take down 2 military helicopters, you're about to have your mind completely blown. Before we dive into this incredible tale of courage and split-second decision-making, make sure you hit that subscribe button and give this video a like, because this story will leave you speechless and you won't want to miss what comes next. Picture this: a 4-year-old lieutenant named Marcus Thompson, fresh out of military academy, stationed at a remote forward operating base in the mountains of Afghanistan. It's October 2019, and Marcus has been deployed for just 3 months. He's what you might call a green officer, book smart, well-trained, but lacking real combat experience. His fellow soldiers respect him, but there's always that unspoken question hanging in the air. When the real test comes, when bullets start flying, and lives are on the line, will this young officer rise to the occasion or crumble under pressure? Marcus had been asking himself the same question every single day since his deployment began. Growing up in a small town in Ohio, he'd always dreamed of serving his country. His grandfather had fought in Vietnam, his father in Desert Storm, and Marcus felt the weight of that legacy on his shoulders. But dreaming about heroism and actually facing life-or-death situations are two completely different things. The forward operating base, designated FOB Charlie, sat on a strategic hilltop overlooking a crucial supply route used by both coalition forces and enemy combatants. It was a small base, maybe 150 soldiers total, but its location made it invaluable for intelligence gathering and controlling movement through the valley below. The base was surrounded by razor wire, sandbags, and watchtowers, but everyone knew that if the enemy really wanted to take them out, those defenses wouldn't hold for long. On the morning of the 15th of October, Marcus woke up to what seemed like just another routine day. The sun was rising over the jagged mountain peaks, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. He'd always been an early riser, a habit that would prove crucial in the events that were about to unfold. After his morning coffee and a quick briefing with his squad, Marcus decided to do a routine inspection of the base's perimeter defenses. As he walked the outer fence line, checking equipment and chatting with the guards, Marcus noticed something that made him pause. In the distance, maybe 2 miles away, there was a dust cloud moving along the valley floor. It was barely visible, and most soldiers would have dismissed it as nothing more than wind kicking up dirt. But Marcus had been studying the terrain and local patterns for months, and something about this dust cloud felt wrong. He grabbed his binoculars and focused on the area. What he saw made his blood run cold. It wasn't wind causing that dust. It was a convoy of vehicles moving in a coordinated pattern, clearly trying to stay hidden, but failing to account for the telltale dust their movement was creating. Even more concerning, the convoy seemed to be positioning itself for what looked like a coordinated attack on multiple coalition positions in the valley. Marcus immediately radioed back to base command. "This is Lieutenant Thompson, requesting immediate aerial reconnaissance of grid coordinates." He rattled off the numbers, his voice steady despite the adrenaline now pumping through his veins. The response came back within minutes. All aerial assets were currently engaged in operations elsewhere. The earliest air support could arrive would be in 3 hours. 3 hours. Marcus knew that if his suspicions were correct, 3 hours would be far too late. He made his way back to the command center, where Major Richards, the base commander, was reviewing intelligence reports. Marcus quickly briefed him on what he'd observed, and within minutes, the entire base was on high alert. But as they monitored radio chatter and satellite feeds, it became clear that Marcus had stumbled upon something much bigger than a simple attack on their base. The enemy wasn't just planning to hit FOB Charlie, they were coordinating a massive assault on 3 different coalition positions simultaneously. It was an ambitious plan that, if successful, would give them control over the entire valley and cut off supply lines for thousands of coalition troops. The convoy Marcus had spotted was just one piece of a much larger puzzle. As the morning progressed, intelligence reports started flowing in. Enemy forces were moving into position all along the valley. What's more, they had air support. They dot 2 attack helicopters that intelligence suggested were being used to coordinate the ground assault and provide close air support for the attacking forces. "Sir," Marcus said to Major Richards, "if those helicopters are coordinating this attack, taking them out could disrupt their entire operation." The major nodded grimly. "I agree, Lieutenant. But we don't have any surface-to-air missiles, and our air support is hours away. Those helicopters are going to tear us apart." That's when Marcus remembered something from his equipment inventory. 3 days earlier, a supply drop had included some new equipment, including a couple of shoulder-fired rocket launchers, RPG-7 second, that had been captured from enemy forces and retrofitted for coalition use. They were stored in the armory, and most soldiers had dismissed them as outdated equipment that would probably never be used. "Sir, what about those RPGs from the supply drop?" Major Richards looked at him skeptically. "Son, those helicopters are going to be moving fast and staying at range. The chances of hitting an attack helicopter with a shoulder-fired rocket are practically zero. You'd need to be incredibly lucky, have perfect timing, and probably some divine intervention." But Marcus had an idea. He'd been studying the topography around the base for months, and he knew there was a high ridge about 800 meters to the east that offered an elevated position with a clear view of the valley. If the helicopters were going to coordinate the ground attack, they'd need to position themselves where they could see the entire battlefield. That ridge might give him the angle and range he needed. "Sir, give me permission to take a small team to the eastern ridge. If I can get into position before the attack begins, I might be able to surprise them." The major stared at him for a long moment. "Lieutenant, you're talking about leaving the safety of the base with just a couple of soldiers and some basically obsolete equipment, hiking to an exposed position, and trying to shoot down military helicopters with weapons that weren't even designed for that purpose. It's practically suicide. With respect, sir, if we don't try something, we're all going to be sitting ducks when those helicopters arrive. At least this way, we have a chance." After a tense moment, Major Richards nodded. "Take Sergeant Williams and Corporal Martinez. You have 1 hour before the attack is expected to begin. If you're not in position by then, abort the mission and get back here." Marcus quickly gathered his gear and briefed his 2 teammates. Sergeant Williams was a 10-year veteran with multiple deployments under his belt, while Corporal Martinez was a communications specialist who could help coordinate with the base. Both men looked at Marcus with a mixture of respect and concern when he explained the plan. "Sir," Sergeant Williams said quietly, "you know the odds of actually hitting those helicopters are basically zero, right?" "I know, Sergeant, but sometimes zero odds are better than no odds at all." The 3-man team left the base through a concealed exit on the eastern side and began making their way toward the ridge. The terrain was rough, with loose rocks and steep inclines that made carrying the heavy rocket launchers a serious challenge. Marcus had grabbed 2 RPGs, figuring that if he was going to do this, he wanted backup options. As they climbed, Marcus found himself thinking about his grandfather's stories from Vietnam. The old man had always talked about how war wasn't about being fearless. It was about being afraid, but doing what needed to be done anyway. Right now, Marcus was terrified, but he was also more focused than he'd ever been in his life. They reached the ridge position with about 20 minutes to spare before the expected attack time. From their elevated position, they had a commanding view of the entire valley. Marcus set up the rocket launchers and used his binoculars to scan the horizon for any sign of the enemy helicopters. At exactly 0800 hours, the attack began. The first sign was the distant sound of rotor blades echoing off the mountain walls. Marcus adjusted his position and focused his binoculars toward the sound. There, 2 dark shapes moving low and fast along the valley floor, heading directly toward the coalition positions. "I've got visual on both targets," Marcus whispered into his radio. "They're approaching from the southwest, flying low to avoid radar detection." The helicopters were still too far away for an effective shot, but Marcus could see their flight pattern. They were moving in a coordinated sweep, staying about 500 meters apart, and using the terrain to mask their approach. These weren't amateur pilots. They knew exactly what they were doing. As the aircraft got closer, Marcus realized just how challenging this shot was going to be. The helicopters were moving at approximately 120 kilometers per hour, constantly changing altitude and direction to avoid presenting a stable target. The rocket launchers he was using had an effective range of about 500 meters against moving targets, which meant he'd have maybe a 3 to 4 second window when they passed through his optimal engagement zone. "Sergeant Williams, I need you to track the second helicopter while I focus on the first one. Call out its position and movement." "Roger that, sir." The first helicopter was now about 800 meters away and closing fast. Marcus could see that it was a Soviet-era Mi-24 Hind, a heavily armed attack helicopter with thick armor plating. His rockets might not even penetrate the armor if he didn't hit it in exactly the right spot. 600 meters, 500 meters, 400 meters. "Now or never," Marcus muttered to himself, shouldering the first rocket launcher and tracking the lead helicopter's movement. He had to calculate not just the helicopter's current position, but where it would be in the 2.5 seconds it would take for his rocket to reach the target. The helicopter banked left, following the contour of the valley. Marcus led the target, exhaled slowly, and squeezed the trigger. The rocket launched with a tremendous roar, leaving a trail of smoke as it streaked across the valley. For what felt like an eternity, Marcus watched the rocket's trajectory, his heart pounding so hard he could hear it over the sound of the helicopter rotors. The pilot of the lead helicopter must have seen the rocket launch, because the aircraft suddenly pulled into a sharp climb, trying to evade the incoming missile. But Marcus had calculated the intercept perfectly. The rocket struck the helicopter's tail rotor assembly in a brilliant flash of flame and debris. The helicopter immediately began spinning out of control, its pilot fighting desperately to maintain altitude as pieces of the tail rotor scattered across the valley floor. Black smoke poured from the engine compartment as the aircraft went into an uncontrolled spiral. "Direct hit on Target 1, Sergeant Williams shouted. "But Target 2 is coming around fast. He's seen our position." Marcus was already grabbing the second rocket launcher, but the second helicopter pilot had learned from his partner's mistake. Instead of maintaining a predictable flight path, the pilot was now flying an erratic pattern, constantly changing speed and direction while moving rapidly toward Marcus's position on the ridge. This pilot was good, really good. He was using the terrain to break up Marcus's line of sight, popping up from behind ridgelines for just a few seconds before disappearing again. And now he was angry. The helicopter's weapon systems were coming online, and Marcus could see the pilot preparing to engage their position with everything he had. "Sir, we need to move. That helicopter is going to light us up in about 10 seconds. But Marcus held his position. He knew that if he moved now, he'd lose the angle he needed for the shot. And if this helicopter survived, it would coordinate the ground attack that would overrun not just his base, but 2 other coalition positions as well. The helicopter emerged from behind a rocky outcropping about 400 meters away, its nose pointed directly at Marcus's position. He could see the pilot's helmet in the cockpit, could see the weapons systems tracking toward him. Time seemed to slow down. Marcus shouldered the second rocket launcher, knowing he had maybe 2 seconds before the helicopter's guns opened fire. The aircraft was moving in a slight arc, trying to bring its weapons to bear while maintaining evasive movement. Marcus tracked the target, led it slightly to account for its movement, and fired. The rocket streaked across the valley just as the helicopter's machine guns opened up. Marcus could hear bullets whining off the rocks around him as he dove for cover, but his eyes stayed locked on the rocket's trajectory. The second pilot was even better than the first. He saw the rocket coming and threw his aircraft into a violent, evasive maneuver, banking hard right and pulling into a climb. For a moment, it looked like the rocket would miss entirely. But the pilot's evasive action had put him into an even more predictable flight path. The rocket, which had initially been aimed at the helicopter's center mass, instead struck the aircraft's main rotor assembly. The explosion was even more spectacular than the first, sending rotor blades spinning away like deadly projectiles as the helicopter disintegrated in mid-air. The second helicopter crashed into the valley floor in a ball of flame and twisted metal, its destruction echoing off the mountain walls like thunder. Marcus lay on the rocky ground for several seconds, hardly believing what had just happened. He had actually done it proc test. He had taken down both helicopters with just 2 shots from weapons that weren't even designed for anti-aircraft use. "Holy hell, sir," Sergeant Williams said, his voice filled with amazement. "I've never seen anything like that in my life. 2 for 2. That's impossible odds." But their celebration was short-lived. The destruction of the helicopters had disrupted the enemy's coordination, but the ground attack was still proceeding. Without air support to guide them, however, the attacking forces were confused and disorganized. Coalition forces were able to repel the assault, and the enemy convoy that Marcus had spotted that morning was forced to retreat. The aftermath of the battle revealed just how significant Marcus's actions had been. Intelligence analysis showed that the coordinated attack, if successful, would have resulted in the loss of 3 coalition bases and potentially hundreds of casualties. By taking out the helicopters that were coordinating the assault, Marcus had single-handedly disrupted an operation that had been months in the planning. The story of the young lieutenant who took down 2 helicopters with 2 shots from captured enemy weapons quickly spread throughout the military. Marcus was awarded the Silver Star for his actions, but he always insisted that he was just doing his job, that any soldier in his position would have done the same thing. But those of us who know the details of what happened that day understand the truth. Marcus Thompson didn't just get lucky. He made a series of split-second decisions under incredible pressure, calculated impossible odds, and executed 2 perfect shots when failure would have meant disaster for hundreds of his fellow soldiers. Years later, when asked about that day, Marcus would say that he learned something important about leadership and courage. "I realized that being brave isn't about not being afraid. He would tell young officers, it's about being absolutely terrified, but doing what needs to be done anyway. And sometimes, when you're willing to take calculated risks for the right reasons, the impossible becomes possible. The two destroyed helicopters still sit in that Afghan valley, their wreckage a testament to what one determined soldier can accomplish when the odds are stacked against him. And every time new troops rotate through that region, they hear the story of Lieutenant Marcus Thompson and his impossible shots. Because sometimes, in the chaos and uncertainty of war, ordinary people do extraordinary things. And sometimes, against all odds, the good guys really do win. That's the end of this incredible true story. If this tale of courage and impossible odds inspired you, make sure you're subscribed to this channel for more amazing stories of heroism from around the world. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. And let me know in the comments below, what would you have done in Lieutenant Thompson's situation? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.